Good evening, Canby. Tonight is Monday, June 9th. It is 7 o'clock, and it is time for the Planning Commission meeting. Tonight we have a couple of public hearings, but we will first offer the microphone to citizens for input on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here that would like to talk about something that's not on the agenda? The few gentlemen in the back that just came in, is there anyone that want to talk about anything not on the agenda? Okay. Not seeing anyone, we will next move to consideration of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes that are for review tonight. The first shall be the May 12th, 2014 meeting.
I would move that we approve the May 12th minutes.
Is there any discussion about, is there a second on that?
A second.
Is there any discussion on the motion and second to approve the May 12th minutes? Okay, all in favor of the approval of the May 12th minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Were none opposed, all were in favor. Next, we have consideration of the Monday, May 28th minutes. And I do have a comment on here. I don't believe, I could be mistaken, but I don't believe we did anything by consensus. On the back, it says that there was consensus to approve the final findings. Unless I made a mistake that day, we always do a vote. And so if we can make sure to track the votes, unless we do it by consensus. To approve a final order, we would normally need to do, maybe we didn't do a vote on that one, but normally we would need to, so let's everybody keep me on task. If we ever don't do a vote on something like final findings, we should do a vote on that, so. I don't remember if we did or not, but that was the only comment that I had on those minutes. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
No second.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the Monday, May 28th minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All five were in favor. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public hearing. This public hearing is annexation 14.01 and zone change 14-01. The summary is to consider a request from Ray N. France, sorry if I get your name wrong, and Connie E. Vicker for approval to, number one, annex 4.47 acres of real property and 0.15 acres of North Pine Street right-of-way, and second, to change the zone district from Clackamas County exclusive farm use to City of Canby R1 low-density residential for property at 1546 North Pine Street, and third, to approve a development agreement to be recorded and run as a covenant with the land. So for that first public hearing, we will read the quasi-judicial hearing script so everyone knows the policies and procedures that will govern this public hearing. This matter before this body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. Please be sure to sign the testimony sheet. For those people other than the applicants that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please sign it on the sheet or speak up when we call for testimony. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. All evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become part of the public record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations, which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it's only to concur with previous testimony. The next item will be any declarations of conflicts of interest. At this time, I would ask that, is there any member of the Planning Commission who has a conflict of interest? If so, please indicate the nature and the extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. None. Okay. Ex parte contacts. Has any of the member of the Planning Commission had any ex parte contacts with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site? If so, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time.
No.
None. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? Not seeing any? We'll move forward. So the public hearing will be conducted in the following order. First, we'll have the staff report. Then we'll have questions from the Planning Commission to staff. Then we will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will go first. Proponents will then follow. Opponents will follow that. Anyone neutral will be next to last, and the rebuttal will go to the applicant. And we'll close the public testimony, and we will have questions of the Planning Commission to staff, discussion and deliberation, and then issue a decision. Does anyone have any questions for the procedures outlined for today's hearing? If there's no questions, I will pass the proverbial gavel to staff. Do we have a staff report today?
I'm going to be doing the first one.
I'll keep the real gavel.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Do you, Mr. Sterlett, want to dim half the lights so we can see the slides better? I think that worked pretty well last time. That's all of them.
There's sunshine.
Maybe. Okay, thank you. So as...
First question, one is, in our notice we said changing from EFU to R1, and in the packet it says RR5 to R1. Can you clarify that for us?
That is an error in there.
I believe it's RRFF5 currently zoned, and the 1402 is the EFU.
Staff
Okay.
report has it right.
So I was reading at the front, but just in there. Okay.
So this is the proposed property here in reddish tone. 4.47 acres is proposed to be annexed in with a half street of the North Pine Street right-of-way, which is 0.15 acres, is also proposed to be annexed in to the city and zoned R1 in conformance with the comprehensive plan low-density residential designation for this property. This is a type 4 application, which needs approval by council. Council makes the final approval, Planning Commission will make the recommendation, and if council approves, then it will be submitted to electorate for November ballot, and if the ballot measure passes, then council will pass with a resolution confirming the annexation. And then staff will make all necessary notifications to agencies. The annexation in theory would allow the development of approximately 19 single-family residences, as shown on the submitted concept plan, which we'll look at in a minute. The submitted traffic study no significant issues were found. A neighborhood meeting was held. The primary concern from the minutes was a desire to not have the land be developed into apartments, and it's not possible if it's zoned R1. The code requires this property, there's a map in the code, can't see it very well in this slide, but that designates which certain properties that need a concept plan, certain properties that need a development agreement within the UGB, and not with properties that are not annexed into the city yet, but that are in the UGB, and this one falls into the development agreement area. So the applicant submitted a draft development agreement, and the city looked over it and made a few minor corrections, but that is in your packet. This agreement basically ensures that 16th will be extended and Plum Court will be extended in conformance with the code's street connectivity standards. And it addresses public facilities. It states that no parks are proposed, and park SDCs will be assessed in lieu. It does not include this conceptual plan is conceptual. It's not set in stone yet. Right-of-way widths and utility layouts will be determined. Final determination will be at the subdivision stage. So this property still would have to go through a subdivision process after it's annexed in. So the development agreement also specifies that. Code's access and spacing standards should all be able to be met with this proposed street layout. Others will be verified at subdivision or home building stage. Half-street improvements will be required on Pine at the time of development. And Pine is also under Clackamas County jurisdiction, so that might be, the counties might be involved too. Let's see, we've got some citizen comments and one written comment about a pathway to the logging road in the to be installed. That's a decision that would be made at the subdivision stage, but it's good to have these comments early on. There is a provision in the code that allows a development to be exempt if there's another pathway within 300 feet of the development. So there is one existing down here already. So it could possibly, the concept plan doesn't show one. So that's something, just opinions that have been stated, citizen comments have been stated, but that's something that will be decided at the subdivision stage. Utility providers did not raise any concerns on service capacities. So one of the code's annexation approval criteria is to analyze the need for additional properties within city limits. And it says that a 3-year supply of land is considered sufficient. And you're supposed to analyze the amount of developable land within the same zoning with R1 zoning and the rate of development. So staff provided and the applicant provided some data on that 3-year supply. And past council determinations have interpretations have stated that it should be a 3-year supply of platted lots. So there, it's So according to that data, we have about, in our rate of development today, we have about enough land for a year's supply of R1 residential in the city as current, based on what's platted now and the rate of current development. That doesn't take into account other subdivisions that have not been platted yet but been recently approved, or other annexations in the works, but I think the data is the best we could do, and it's difficult to predict future building rates, so, and rates of development and subdivision timeframes, so, but based on that data, we don't have enough. Today's data and today's rate of development, we only have a year's supply, so. And staff accepts all the applicants' submitted responses to the comprehensive plan criteria. Comprehensive plan encourages annexations of the least agriculturally productive land first into the city, and this one is not, this property hasn't been farmed for years. And it's not large enough to be a viable farm, according to the applicant. And then I guess some other, with most developments, there'll be a loss of open space, increased traffic, but those are typical consequences of growth. And so with that, staff recommends approval.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff before we open the public testimony? Okay. We'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Chair Smith and Planning Commissioners. I'm Pat Sissel with Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. I'm here on behalf of the applicants, Ray Franz and Connie Vicker. Ray Franz grew up on this property with his brother, who's also a co-owner, many, many years ago. And they've seen the city come up to the border of their property, and a lot has changed in the neighborhood since they grew up there. But they feel that now is the time to bring this property into the city. This is the property here. You can see that it's got a subdivision to the south. This is the Logging Road Trail. Over here is the Postal Way Estates development. The property to the north was annexed by Norm and Jenny Beck in 2010, I believe. North of that is the Willamette Grove apartment complex, I believe. And across the Pine Street is a property that was annexed in 2008, I believe, by Thomas Holmes. And then there's a couple other properties here that haven't been annexed yet. So this is an area that is transitioning from more rural area to an urban area, and it's nearing the end of that transition period. Can you zoom in? Or, excuse me, next slide, please.
Next slide.
Next slide. A close-up of the property. It's got the house down here in the southwest corner, and it's mainly pasture. It's got plum court that dead ends near the southeastern corner of the site. The Logging Road Trail is along the east side, and then Pine Street is along the west side. There's a few trees spaced out across the property, but mainly the site is pasture land. There's some lawn up around the home, but it's mainly just pasture today. And at 5 acres, what we found in dealing with other annexations in the city of Canby through the years is 5 acres by itself just isn't viable, a viable farm. The property to the north, as I said, was annexed in 2010. It's zoned R1 as well. Next slide, please. So the site is here, and it is in an area of mainly low-density residential zoning. It's got some medium-density residential in an area to the northwest across Pine, and then farther to the north is the apartment complex and other high-density residential properties along Territorial Road. The one comment that we did hear at the neighborhood meeting was they don't want an apartment complex. We heard from several people that it felt like it was a surprise when the apartment complex came in here, and we assured them that the property would be annexed as R1, and under the R1 zoning, that apartment complex isn't a permitted use. So, next slide, please. So the site will roughly permit 18 or 19 lots is what we have figured. This is a buildable lands analysis that we did on behalf of this application. And what we did is we started with the buildable lands analysis that the city had maintained through about 2006. And at that point in time, I think there was some staff changeover, there was a lot going on, and they just kind of lost track of where the buildable lands were, what the numbers were. So what we did is we went back and totaled up we started with the city's old buildable lands inventory and then tracked every subdivision and every partition plat that had recorded from the end of their analysis to the beginning of 2014, which was actually a pretty easy task because when development crashed, there was very little that got recorded. But we came up with that total, and then we worked with Carla in the Development Services Department to determine how many of those lots in all of these subdivisions still remained out there. And what we came up with was in the R1 zone, as of, I think this is February 21st, 33 lots remained in Canby, developed, platted, ready to be built on. And 7 remained in the R1.5 zone. So in your single-family zones in the city of Canby, the R1 and the R1.5, there was a total of 40 lots that are platted and available for building permits. The city's determined that the 8-year average is 45 building permits per year. That ranged from a high of 201 building permits taken out in 2006, right before the crash, to a low of 4 permits in 2009 and 2010. So it crashed from over 200 lots, building permits per year, down to 4. So that 45 lot per year average is really being tugged down by those lean years. I think you'll see as the economy and housing continues to rebound that 45 lots per year that we're currently estimating is probably low, because I know that the 5 to 10 year average prior to the crash was up closer to 100 lots a year. So if you assume 40 lots and 45 lots per year is the average number of building permits taken out, then Canby has about a 10-month supply as of February 21st. So that's been dwindled away a little bit in the few months since then. Now this annexation, if it goes to the voters, it wouldn't go to the electorate until November of this year. A subdivision application therefore couldn't be submitted until after it was annexed into the city, so that would likely be a subdivision application couldn't come before you until sometime in early 2015 at the earliest. given the timeframes to get construction plans approved and a subdivision built and homes built and ready for occupancy, I don't think you would see homes built in this subdivision before late 2015 at the earliest, even if everything went as fast as it could. There's just a lot of steps to get from the annexation process to have it, homes built out on the ground. So, anyway, I think you can see from this that there certainly is a shortage of land in the city. Now, staff mentioned that there have been some subdivisions recently approved. There's going to be, those lots are going to become, platted lots here soon. Homes will be built on them, and it's just a natural cycle as, as the economy keeps rolling. I think you have to keep annexing land to some degree to keep that 3-year supply up. We've seen Dinsmore Estates 2 and Northwoods 2 are those, and Emerald Gardens, which is an R2 subdivision, so it really doesn't apply to this. Those are the subdivisions that I'm aware of that have come in before you. And so I think we're still well below the 3-year supply.
Let me pause you there for a second. I won't take away from your approval, your time on this, but I have a question for you. On page 5 of your presentation report, you had talked about the school capacity and current enrollment numbers.
Yes.
I noted that your capacity figures came from 2009, so I'm assuming that you didn't somehow adjust those to take into account the closure of Trost and Ackerman and the moving around of other kids to fill in those special changes, since that happened since 2009.
No, that's right.
Okay.
We did not take the movement of the closing of Trost and the movement of that around.
Okay.
Next slide, please. The development plan, the general land use plan, a little bit difficult to see, but it would include a new street, 16th Avenue, that would connect to Pine, and it would include the extension of Plum Court. This is the logging road trail here and Postal Wade Estates on this side. When we went to a pre-application meeting with city staff, we actually had a pedestrian walkway tracked in here, and the service providers and staff felt that it probably wasn't necessary. Public Works doesn't want to maintain a lot of these walkways. They tend to cause troubles for the neighbors who live next to them. They can be noisy. They can be graffitied. You can have issues with maintenance. It's more time for them to have to go out and weed them or spray them. So anyway, they felt at the pre-app meeting that it wasn't necessary. It's really a subdivision issue more than an annexation issue. But if you could go to the next slide. This is the subdivision directly to the south, and this is a 100 by 100 foot lot that butts up to the property that is being annexed. And then this is a 10-foot wide walkway right here. So 100 feet to the south, there is a walkway. Next slide, please.
Is that walkway just next to 16th there on the Postal Way? Is that what that is? Is that a walkway from the logging road into
Back up.
Postal Way?
This is the Postal Wade Estates. There is a walkway right here.
Yeah, that one, okay.
Connecting Postal Wade Estates to the logging road trail.
Okay.
The other trail there is one right here that exists 100 feet south of the common property line. And then, can we jump 2 slides forward? I don't know that it looks awfully light.
I can make it darker.
What we've done here is
Do you want me to go in?
Yeah, go as dark as you can.
Do you have a copy of this, your PowerPoint available for the record?
I do.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so this is the site that we're looking at here, and we've had some work with Mr. Beck and others on the Beck property that's already been annexed, and the anticipated street plan for the Beck property would include an extension of 17th Avenue that would also connect to Plum Court, and that it would include pedestrian connection to the logging road trail here. So because there's one right here, and because there's one that everybody agrees should be here, it felt there wasn't a need for a third. So just so you know where the planning behind how we arrived at the need not to have that walkway. But again, we feel it's really a subdivision issue and not an annexation issue. Now, this property can be served from utilities available in both Pine Street and in the Logging Road Trail. There is sewer in the Logging Road Trail, and it's anticipated that if the Beck property were to divide before this property divides, that sewer would come in from the Logging Road Trail and then would be extended up to pick up this property as well. There's also sewer in Plum Court. There's public water that ends right here in Pine Street, and public water ends in Plum Court here. Those water mains will be extended up and looped, and eventually it'll all be a looped system through here. Storm drainage would be handled by the North Redwood Advanced Financing District. There's a storm drain pipe that comes up along the south end of Postal Way to States and terminates right here. And that pipe is there to serve these two properties. That they will drain to that, and ultimately it drains out to Redwood Street and then north to Territorial and to the Willow Creek area. And all other utilities were noted to be available for the site. So I think, it's as I said, it's in an area that's in the process of becoming urbanized. It has been rural through the years, but we feel it's the right time for this property to come in. It'll be the last property, it is currently the last property in the county on the east side of Pine Street. And we feel that the timing's right to bring this in, and that it's just a natural progression for the neighborhood to convert from rural to urban. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have regarding this.
Is there any questions for this gentleman? Okay.
All right.
Are there any other proponents that would like to speak in favor? Come on up, sir. Please again state your name and your address for the record.
My name's Gordon Root with Stafford Land Company. Our address is 485 South State Street, Lake Oswego, Oregon. I'm here as a result, we presently have the Beck property under contract to purchase, and as you look at the bottom of your agenda today, it has our neighborhood meeting notice for Thursday night. We are going to submit an application for 19 lots. We will be including within that the connection to the Logging Road Trail, and we'll be extending properties to serve this. This site that was in question, just as Pat had outlined. So we are moving forward with that proposal and feel that this would be an excellent annexation into the city just to continue to meet the lot demand and supply.
Okay. So any questions for this gentleman?
Thank you.
Are there any other proponents that would like to speak in favor of this application? Not seeing any, we'll move to any opponents. Anyone would like to speak against this application? Not seeing any opponents. Is there anyone that is neutral that has any other generalized comments? Okay, Mr. Sissel, do you have any rebuttal to Mr. Root? Okay, then we will. If I don't see anybody approaching the microphone, we will close the public hearing portion of this application, and we will move to commission questions for staff. Any commissioners have any questions on any of the things you heard or anything for staff? Okay, let's close the questions for staff portion and move to deliberation. Is there any motions, any discussion of this application?
Move to turn the lights back off. I'd like to move that we approve the annexation, file number ANN ZC 14-01.
One second, that.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve. I will make a little bit of commentary. The thing that I note, now I know this is a annexation approval, and I'm in support of the annexation, but then I would also note that they have, at least tentatively, even though this is only an annexation, have some relatively large-ish lots planned, which is nice. They're not maxed out at the 10,000, but they're not tiny lots either, which is nice. When he was talking about the land need, I would, I think it's well known that in Canby there's very much a need for large residential lots, and there aren't those. So, at least these are not tiny, and they're, a few of them are particularly big. So that's, good to serve that need. But that's really my only comment. Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve annexation 14-01 and zone change 14-01 signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. I believe there was all five, I'm saying not, all five were in approval. The recommendation has been made. Do we need to sign anything official on a recommendation like we do on a permit?
We're going to bring you back a written findings next meeting.
Okay.
I think.
Next, we will move to another public hearing on annexation 14-02, zone change 14-02. Considering a request from Daniel and Mary Stoller, Geraldine K. Markham, Jerry and Cynthia Rice, Ralph A. Netter, and Hugh and Roberta Boyle for the approval to, 1, annex 31.10 acres and 0.5 acres of Southeast 13th Avenue right-of-way, change the zone from the District Clackamas County EFU to City of Canby R1 low-density residential and R1.5 medium-density residential for the property located north of Southeast 13th Avenue, east of the South Teakwood Street, and west of the Logging Road Trail and the Sequoia Parkway extension. And third, to adopt a development concept plan. I will reread most of the quasi-judicial public hearing script. The matter before the Planning Commission requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. Proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In doing so, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. I'll keep track of that time. Other proponents or opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and the applicants will be given 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. All evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access to become part of the public record. Please make sure if you have any information that comes on a disc or a piece of paper that you give it to staff so they can put it in the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify. Is there any member of the Planning Commission that has a conflict of interest? If so, I would ask that the member state what the interest is, state the nature and extent of the conflict, and whether you intend to participate or abstain from the matter. No conflicts. Okay. Any ex parte contacts? Has any member of the hearing body had any ex parte contacts with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site? Please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time.
I live in
None.
Benton Farm, so I buy it all the time.
Yeah, jog somewhere near here. I'm not exactly sure. Pretty frequently, but. Is there anyone in the audience that has any questions about conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? Okay. The public hearing can be conducted in the following order. We'll have the staff report, then we'll have questions of the Planning Commission for staff. We'll open the public hearing for testimony. We'll do the applicant, proponents, then opponents, then neutral, then rebuttal. And then we'll close the public testimony. Commission will have a final chance to ask questions of staff, and then we will discuss and deliberate, and then issue a decision. Are there any questions about the procedure? If not, staff, would you like to please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Brian Brown, I present this report for you tonight. And this annexation involves a fairly large tract as far as annexations usually go. And we have 5 different property owners involved. The area on this slide with the red marks gives you the identification of those 5 tax lots that are involved. And the 2 tax lots on the west, the Boyle and the Netter, will end up being those 2 right here, proposed for R1 zoning, and then the other 3 tax lots to the east have R1.5 zoning, which is a medium density residential zoning. And those are in accordance with the comprehensive plan map. And so this is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The zoning will follow that. This gives you a rendition of the actual owners of the property, and they were stated in the staff report. We've got from the very east there, the Stollers have the largest tract, and in the upper northeast corner of the site, in this area right up here, there's a lot of trees standing, and this is where the park is proposed in this area. Whenever annexation comes in, staff makes an evaluation in accordance with our master parks plan and acquisition plan to evaluate whether it would be a good location to have a park. And the city actually has the ability to require a park when it's suitable to meet that plan. And that's kind of what we did in this case, except it was pretty easy because the Stollers were very interested in doing a park in that area. So it worked out really great, and our park planner, Matilda Diaz, went out and took a look at it and said, oh, this is just really an ideal place because of the natural resources, basically the trees. And this location also is adjacent to the logging road footpath, goes right along this border, and then just on the edge of that is the new Sequoia Parkway extension that just opened today with a groundbreaking that connects down to 13th Avenue. And up at this top north border is a trail that is on the school district's property. And so there can be easy connections to this logging road trail and to the school property through this park, so it becomes a handy wayside area for people to stop off, sit in a park bench, enjoy the tree canopy, and so it's a very nice place for a park, we feel. In an annexation, there is the approval criteria indicated There's really about 10 criteria that are listed. Some of them are kind of duplicative in my way of thinking, but probably the most important one in this particular one is the first criteria is that they are required to do a development concept plan. That differs from the annexation you just heard, where they did a development agreement. A development concept is completely different in that the Planning Commission is reviewing an actual site plan for the property. It's a conceptual one, and make a recommendation to the council so that they would actually approve a covenant, so to speak, that would get filed of record saying that when you develop the property, if annexed by the vote of the people, that this is the concept that you will submit with an actual subdivision application. So it ties them down very closely. They're kind of similar because the development agreement does that in a way too, but the concept plan is a little bit more rigorous study of the site and all the infrastructure requirements that might be necessary to fully develop it. And one of the other criteria that's probably most important in any annexation is making sure that all necessary public utilities are either existing or will be available by the developer in his actual development application, that he can easily extend those to the site and take care of the, in this particular case, the only one that probably is worth some discussion, and you may want to talk to the applicant's engineer about, is that this particular property will need a new sanitary lift station developed to serve this part of town. And it's a project that will likely be for the city to put in, utilizing system development charges that we collect over the years. And so there'll be a timing issue of when this thing gets annexed and when they decide that it's going to be developed, that the city will have to get busy and create what looks to be a possibility of a temporary lift station first, just to serve this development, and then a little bit further south and east, the master sanitary sewer plan has a permanent location for a permanent sanitary lift station that will be needed. And so depending on how quickly the property actually develops would determine probably whether there's a permanent sewer lift station in place by then. Probably more likely it won't be, and there may be a temporary lift station that will be developed just for this. So that's the infrastructure. Would mention that a traffic study was performed, and one of the primary things that they looked at in that traffic study was the points of access to serve 32 some plus acres of potential new development. And that in the concept planning comes out to around 132 platted lots. It could be more or less depending on how large or small they develop those lots. And they have some leeway in how they might want to do that, even with approval of the development concept plan. You'll see in the maps that have been provided with that they give a circulation pattern of where the streets will be. And so if the concept plan is approved as recommended, then you're going to know where the streets will be, but you won't know exactly what size lots they may or may not be. That again will take place at the subdivision stage, and you have a chance to look at those at a real development at that time to see how that works. It gives the flexibility, because our understanding currently is that the 5 property owners involved will not necessarily develop this property. What more likely will sell it to a developer, one or more. There could be one developer that comes in and buys them all the tax lots and develops the whole thing in a phased manner. Or it could develop individually by different developers by tax lot. And if it does, then that will be the purpose of the concept plan. If it develops kind of individually over time, they need to all fit together in a puzzle piece according to the concept plan that's going to be developed. And that was the goal of the council when they changed the annexation ordinance, is to get people to think out for a larger area so that we can plan for things like a sewer lift station that would have to serve not only this 32 acres, but even a larger area. And make sure that all the pipes and connecting streets are going to be developed at the right size to serve, so we don't have any inefficiency in development. And so it's trying to help us plan things out. I have to compliment Pat Sissel, the engineer, on this, and that his concept plan was very thorough. And so I think you'll see that if you recommend approval of the whole concept plan, there's a whole series of maps that give you all sorts of details about each one of these items: the water, the sewer, stormwater, how it's going to be handled. And we have 2 access points coming down to connect with 13th Avenue, and a complete grid street that goes throughout the internal part of this area. And it meets all of the transportation system plans, proposals for interconnectedness, and so there's not a need for turnarounds anywhere for the fire department, so they had no problems with the concept plan and how it's proposed. And I mentioned the park, and I do have a park plan. There's the circulation plan. It also shows the property to the west and how the streets will likely come through it from where it's developed even further to the west, where the existing street pattern exists. And so it's really just following straight through east and west, a complete grid-type pattern in this part of Canby as it develops. Then you do have a couple of short cul-de-sacs shown as a concept next to the park that's up in that northeast corner, which you'll see on this next slide. So there's a kind of rendition of where the park would be. My understanding is the park is completely contained on a single tax lot, the Stollers, and that wasn't by accident, I don't believe. I think that was by design. It's a 3.42 something acre park, so it's a good-sized park. I don't know that you're necessarily aware, but the city's new proposed budget that should be approved next week does result in one less park maintenance person. The council is currently concerned about our ability to be able to maintain future parks, but they also have very vocally recognized that we need to continue to look long range. Hopefully our budget considerations for this year and maybe another year or two that may be slim aren't going to last for many years, and that we need to take advantage when annexations occur and when opportunities present themselves to develop and acquire, when we can, ideal locations for parks that match our master parks plan area. And parks can be left in a natural state that aren't maintenance intensive, and even this one that's planned with some walkways within it, some pathways, most of it is left in a manner that it isn't going to take a great deal of care. And so I thought I'd just point that out.
Brian, the DCP here they're proposing to deed this to the city, or put a reservation of use just for park use, or what's the plan with respect to that?
There is a possibility that they may actually develop the park as well as dedicating the park. So what will likely happen is either the park will change hands, they'll sell it to the city, and then get SDC credits in return, or they could possibly develop with a subdivision and just dedicate the park to the city on the plat. And again, they'll get SDC credits in return.
So with the development concept plan, as long as it's
As long
going
as
to be a park in some way, shape, or form, they
That's
can
right.
figure out whether it's deeded or dedicated
Yep.
or...
we can figure out those details, we believe, after it's annexed, and the concept plan, by having it approved and recorded, will guarantee that the park will be in this location and of that approximate size and shape and scope, so that we have an idea of what it is we're getting and what we're trying to preserve with the trees that are in that particular area, and then acknowledge the fact that if we're going to have a park in this area, this is the location where we want the park.
Minus the current electrical wiring fence.
Yes, hopefully so. And there are existing homes on this 32 acres as well, and so, as it redevelops into a new subdivision, most likely those homes are probably going to be removed. Although we've seen subdivisions where one or more homes have been able to be incorporated into the design of the subdivision layout. I didn't see any discussion about that. In the previous annexation, Pat had submitted the same chart that talked about how many platted lots are available in Canby. And so I won't go over that again, but we're talking about both R1 and R1.5 zoning. And so again, there are about 40 lots. And as Pat mentioned, that was in February, and we have considerably fewer now because we've continued to issue quite a few permits. And assignment of the zoning, I've mentioned. The map amendment application was submitted, and so we, with recommending annexation of this property, we're also recognizing their request for zoning of the R1 and the R1.5. And as I mentioned, that's in the conformance with the comp plan, and all the necessary utilities are available, and as I mentioned, with the cities constructing a sanitary lift station, we will be able to supply and serve this development. And that lift station's in accordance with the master sewer plan. Our recommendation is that you approve this annexation and the development concept plan that's been proposed, and that upon annexation, the R1 and R1.5 zoning will go into effect.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Saber, go ahead first. I heard you. Sorry, Mr.
Can we go back to the idea, the concept of the temporary lift station, and then later on the more permanent station? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but what is the expense to the city? What's the trigger point for building that temporary lift station as opposed to just building a more permanent one, permanent station? I guess my question goes back to if this is developed piecemeal, the temporary lift station makes a whole bunch of sense. But if it's going to be developed all at one time, why would you go through? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know if that I can answer that real well, but this, if this is annexed and it develops right away, then my understanding from our city engineer is that a temporary lift station will be needed. And one of the reasons that that's more likely than just going ahead and building the permanent one is that the city hasn't secured the property where the master sewer plan shows that the permanent lift station needs to go. And so that may take us longer to secure that property and build that permanent lift station, whereas we have the ability to put in the temporary one immediately if this development needs it. we need to eventually develop the permanent station, but that's a big expense, and you want to be sure that quite a bit of development is coming online in a fairly rapid manner before you probably do that. And at this point, there's been no analysis of what it's going to cost, since we haven't even secured the property, or whether we have that many funds to actually build the permanent one right now.
That would seem to me to be a
Well,
bit problematic.
Well, it would be problematic if the city engineer didn't indicate that here's a location that's suitable for a temporary sewer lift station. And so that's why we're still moving forward, that this doesn't seem to present a problem, because he seemed comfortable with building a temporary one if that was necessary.
So a temporary lift station would, if they can't annex, if they can't acquire the land necessary for a permanent station, or come up with the sufficient funds to build the permanent station, then you're left with the temporary lift station on a more quasi-permanent basis. Would that be correct?
Well, at least, but it will be able to serve this 32 acres without any problem.
For a long period of time, or?
Permanently if it had to.
Huh?
But it won't serve the much larger area that this part of town will need the larger permanent lift station for. I think those are very good questions. I've had those thoughts in my mind as well. I left it to our city engineer, and he didn't seem to have concerns with this proposal and how they would serve it. And it's possible we could still move towards the permanent lift station now that, if this actually does get annexed.
And the lift station, the permanent lift station would be financed out of systems development charges?
That's my understanding.
Let me speak to that, because I want us to make sure, I mean, we have a delicate balance, but our decision really rests upon what are the applicable review criteria. What can we approve or deny based upon, and what does our code say? And that, the relevant provision that we have on that is that there be a state